Welcome into an all-new episode of Panthers on Tap. I'm Curtis Rauen, joined by Ricky Raines, coming to you guys on a Wednesday night. It's been about a month since we've did an episode. Ricky, it's good to see you as always. How are you doing tonight?
Good to see you, man. I feel like we haven't talked about Panthers football in forever, man. Like the season might as well be a couple of weeks away as long as it's felt, man. But I'm doing good. I'm glad to have a couple of beers and talk about the Senior Bowl and Panthers specific stuff. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. The little break was good. Kind of refresh a little bit. I'm sure both of us have been doing some digging on some guys. Obviously, the Senior Bowl has come and gone. So we got a lot to talk about there tonight. We'll also talk about some of the trade options. As you guys can see, Bryson is not here this evening. He is under the weather, but Ricky, since I don't know if he's listening or not, I think he's a little scared to talk about that Duke UNC drubbing this past weekend when Duke kicked Carolina's ass on national television.
He's got the Tar Heel flu, huh?
Yeah. So he's still embarrassed about that that loss, but no, he's sick, so hopefully he gets back and he's next time we do an episode, he'll be here with us.
I wore a Charlotte Checkers hat, just a hockey hat, so that at least something Bryson related was here with us, you know.
Oh, that's funny. Well, the chat is off to a roaring start. Carter, we appreciate it. As always, let's go. He's pumped, making true money. What's good, fellas? Appreciate you tuning in. Ricky's mom, as always.
Oh, yeah. What's up, Mom?
Friend of the podcast. We appreciate it. Ready for
friend of mine
podcast. But yeah, we got a lot to talk about. Let's get into these trade. This Super Bowl week has really ramped up with some of these guys. We obviously know Myles Garrett requested a trade from Cleveland, and then Cooper Kupp announced online as well that the Rams want to get rid of him. So I kind of want to start there before we get into the Senior Bowl stuff. And that's let me pull this up here. Here we go. So Ricky, I mean, I know it's very baseline at this point. I mean, we kind of know what Myles Garrett wants. But who should the Panthers pursue out of these two? And if any, or both, where are you at with these two guys?
So before I do that, because I do have plenty to say about that, hi to Edgar, Panthers analyst in the chat. Edgar Salmingo Jr., a friend of the shows. He also has a tremendous new show out right now. If you haven't heard of it, it's called Draft Crush. He's got this stooge of a co-host, but it's a really good program. Check it out. It's on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, all that stuff. Edgar, thanks for being here. So look, when I look at this trade opportunity, right? Myles Garrett is one of those players. I don't care about draft picks to get a reigning defensive player of the year who is 29 years old, who is a terrific run defender, an absolute terror as a pass rusher. The hang-up for this deal, right, or at least this is the perception of the hang-up of it, is he wants to play for a contender. So how could he play for the Carolina Panthers, right? Well, the Carolina Panthers, tell me why we're not a contender in the NFC South. And then tell me why you're not a contender for the Super Bowl if you make the playoffs. Like, just think of the logic there. How many times have we seen 6 seeds, 7 seeds, 5 seeds make a run at the right time of the postseason and get to the promised land? At least play for it, right? You don't have to try to convince me that the Panthers aren't good enough to try to get better. That's one of the craziest arguments I see. And most of it is on like Twitter and the rest of the internet realm. But when we're talking about a window of winning and people are like, man, we're not there. We're not ready. You can't mortgage all of those picks when your team isn't ready to compete. Your team has to be ready to compete. You're in year 3 of your rookie quarterback window. I just saw the graphic that came out today about the average salaries for starting positions, right? It was like rookies on one side or with rookies and then without rookies on one side. The average starting salary for a starting quarterback in the NFL, not considering rookies, is $40 million. Think about that for a second. $40 million. Bryce Young is going to cost that soon. If Bryce Young is who you think he is and who I think he is and who he showed the NFL world to be at the end of that season last year, he is going to run that cost. Why would you not consider this your window? This is when you add proven players, and not just a proven player in Myles Garrett, a proven elite player who has been elite at a position that we have been struggling to find production at for a decade. I mean, you can talk about Brian Burns, and our fan base hated him because he only got 9 or 10 sacks a year, right? He only got 9 or 10 sacks. So the baseline for Panthers fans, for an edge player, you got to get at least 10 sacks or you're a bum. Well, good news. Myles Garrett gets that, right? And he'll get it here. He'll get it anywhere. You go for it, man, if you can get Myles Garrett. If he costs you 1 first pick and a second and a third, adios. Like, oh, no, we might not be able to draft the next Jonathan Mingo. Oh, no. Like, what would we do if we can't draft the next Johnny Mingo at 39? If it costs 2 firsts, what are we looking at with the first-round picks that are so much better than Myles Garrett? We talk about Abdul Carter in this draft, right? He's the best prospect in the draft by consensus. What would be the ideal situation for him? He turns into Micah Parsons. Maybe he scratches the surface of like a Myles Garrett. Okay. So you want to bank on him possibly becoming Myles Garrett instead of going and getting Myles Garrett. He's 29, man. I'm just going to tell you, like, that's at least 4, 5, 6 years of playing good football left in his future. The guy takes incredible care of his body. He hasn't had huge injury issues. I don't know, man. Am I crazy for this? Thinking like, if he were ever to agree coming here, Curtis, you wouldn't just send the entire homecoming package to be like, come on in, man. Like, I'll personally tell you this. I will buy Myles Garrett's cookout trays for the rest of his time in the NFL if he comes down here to Carolina, man. Cookout, Bojangles, you name it, man. I'll be like an Uber driver. You call me, I'll go pick it up, and I'll drop it right off at your mansion.
Yeah, I'm all in on this trade too. He changes games. I mean, you talk about an edge rusher that he changes football games for you. And I get is it probably a pipe dream for us? Maybe, but man, like, this is the position that we've all been wanting these past couple of years, this elite prospect at the edge position like you talked about. And this guy's elite. And, you know, I still think he's got a lot left in the tank just based off of his production since he's been in the league. But man, would that be fun to see him on that defense, a defense that has really struggled. And I agree, like, you're not going to find a Myles Garrett on defense in this draft. You're not. You're just not. And I get wanting to save picks. I understand that, but man, when a guy this doesn't come around very often, guys like this. So when you have the chance, I mean, shoot for the moon.
And when we talk, usually, man, when we're talking about like saving picks, right? It's for a player that isn't as sure of a thing as what Myles Garrett is at a position of need, right? Like, you remember our fan base, man, was super opposed to trading a third for Jerry Jeudy because Jerry Jeudy isn't that kind of guy, right? Like, they didn't want to trade a 3rd round pick. We want to hold on to a third as opposed to giving a possible wide receiver 1, maybe wide receiver 2 at worst. But instead, we go and we're drafting wide receivers in the 1st and 2nd round, right? Expecting immediate production and impact from those rookies.
And we might be doing it again.
And we might end up be doing it again. But so then when we look at ourselves in this mirror, we're staring at ourselves saying, how do we fix one of the historically worst defenses? And then one of the most dominant defensive players of our time is sitting there saying, yeah, I want to be traded. And our group of fans is like, nah, that ain't going to work here. Like, let him say it's not going to work. I would never, if I was the Carolina Panthers, I would never be the ones that said that's not going to work. I would force him to say that. And I would tell Cleveland, hey, man, look, convince him. I'll give you what you want. Convince him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was hoping and praying. He was on a couple of the outlets today, and I'm Rich Eisen, who's also on Amina Kimes. I was really hoping one of them would. I know she specifically referred to like the Commanders, and Eisen kind of just floated around like, what do you have list of teams. I was just hoping to hear a little sliver of hope with Carolina at some point, but no one had asked it directly.
Was it Matt Harmon that was talking on his show or at Radio
Yeah, he's
Row?
the one that proposed the trade. Like
Right.
Carolina's like a sleeper team.
Yeah, and he said the same thing that we just talked about. He was like, I think Carolina Panthers can win the NFC South next year. So, like, how does that not make them a contender? All you would have to do is say to Miles, too, look, man, Cleveland's a miserable place. Like, not the city. I'm not trying to say anything about the city, but that Browns franchise, they're stuck in this purgatory of freak boy masseuse sexual deviant assault felon, right? You got that guy as your quarterback that's taking up $300 million guaranteed. And then you're possibly looking at drafting a rookie to try to like quell that fire. I don't know how that makes any sense. Or you're looking at drafting Abdul Carter to play with him or replace him. So like you're not going to be competitive against the Baltimore Ravens, against the Bills, the Chiefs. You're not going to be competitive in the AFC. In the NFC, what are we really talking about? We're that scared of Baker Mayfield in the NFC South because it's not Michael Penix Jr. and whoever is playing quarterback for the Saints that's scaring me and telling me that we can't win with Bryce Young. Baker Mayfield, I think Baker's a good quarterback, but are they really juggernauts? They beat us by 5 games this year. They won the NFC South by 5 games over us. That's a matter of 2 or 3 games going a different way. And we took both Super Bowl teams to the wire at the end of our season. And you think that we shouldn't feel optimistic that we could compete for the dirty bottom NFC South next season? Not me, man. We're contenders.
And mind you, we also went toe-to-toe with the 2 teams there in the Super Bowl right now. We're
Exactly.
a drop and a 25-yard stop run by Patrick Mahomes away from having 2 more wins. So
Exactly.
But let's go to the flip side here with Cooper Kupp. Because it feels like there's not so much excitement surrounding him. I still think he's a decent player. I know he's been dealing with injuries. But Carolina, I mean, they don't have the top of the line wide receiver room right now either. So what are your thoughts on Cooper Kupp and acquiring him from LA?
So I wouldn't turn my nose up to it simply because of the fact of the caliber player that Cooper Kupp has been. I don't genuinely believe he's that same caliber right now, today. I worry a little bit about redundancy again in that wide receiver room when you look at it, because I think that him and Adam Thielen have a relatively similar skill set and role on an offense. I think that Jalen Coker is kind of the slot man in the waiting room, right? Kind of like waiting for Adam Thielen to usher his own way out and take over there. I think that Coker has a little bit of versatility. I don't think he's an X, so I think you're talking about a flanker or a slot. Then you've got Xavier Legette, who's got to be in your plans. He was your first round pick. What are you going to do with him? You want to develop him. You want him to get the time. You want him to build that rapport with Bryce Young. But at the end of the day, if you're talking about Cooper Kupp costing an early day 3 pick, I mean, I don't see it being a high draft pick. He's an older guy with injuries. He's clearly slowed down a step. I think that you're looking at maybe a 4th round pick for Cooper Kupp. I mean, what else would it really be? They've made him available, right? It's not like these are workings that are happening in the underbelly of the trade market. They're telling you, we don't want this guy on our team. Somebody come get him. When you do that, you lose a little bit of leverage, right? So if it costs a 4th to bring Cooper Kupp in, yeah, sign me up again, man. What have we done with 4th round picks here in Carolina that is making you say Cooper Kupp is worse?
Send Dallas is their way, and
that's right, man. We could literally turn Jonathan Mingo into Cooper Kupp. You don't want to do that? I do. I'll tell you what. I'll also draft that kicker out of Miami with the 4th pick. I'll turn Johnny Mingo into the kicker from Miami. I don't care. Turn that pick into something that matters to your football team, bro.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not obviously as sexy as the Myles Garrett trade would be for Carolina, but I do think there's value there of adding him to the room. And I understand the gripe, Ricky, and this isn't going at you at all because I see this all the time, but I'm tired of the mindset of like, oh, this guy is like this dude on our team. Like, just get good football players, stack the room with good football players, and you'll find ways to get those guys involved. Like, we need to get out of this mindset of oh, this guy doesn't fit this measurement or this guy that like that's bullshit. Just go out and get good football players. You find ways to do it. Like go follow the Philadelphia Eagles model. Go follow the Lions model. They don't give a shit about that. They just go and get good football players.
Right. And look, man, haven't both Adam Thielen and Cooper Kupp dealt with their share of injuries? Didn't Jalen Coker miss a little bit of time with an injury last year? So what is the harm of having this three-headed slot monster, if you will, as the depth? That if one of them isn't feeling their best or is dealing with a nagging injury, take a week off, Adam Thielen. We're going to let Cooper man the slot for a week. You know, like, is that a huge drop-off? It seems to be a little bit better than where we have been in that situation, where you're sitting there and you're staring down the barrel at David Moore and, you know, a couple of his buddies that are off the couch that are coming in to play the reserve role. I just don't think that you can become a worse team by having better players. You just said it. How can you become a worse football team by getting better players? Across the board, if it's feasible and it doesn't completely wreck your team's future, you should go for it. And by wreck your future, I'm not talking about the Myles Garrett and 1 or 2 first-round picks. That doesn't wreck your future, in my opinion. If you're getting a guy to play for 4 or 5 years, that's a good trade for me. Now, if you want to give up 2 first-round picks for a guy on a half-year contract because he's a free agent coming up, that's a silly thing to do. And I think that's bad business. Bringing in Myles Garrett or bringing in Cooper Kupp does not seem like bad business to me.
Sorry, I'm just typing this quickly here. I apologize.
That's all right. While Curtis is typing away there like a wonderful secretary, we didn't even talk about what we're drinking this evening.
I know. That was one thing I was going to bring up. That's okay.
Look, we were so concerned about Bryson not feeling well and wishing him the best, right? And Curtis, you were very genuine about that you were worried that, you know, the Tar Heel was still like stuck in the bottom of the mud. But I have a double IPA. It's called the Honey Pie Double IPA from Charlotte Brewery here, Birdsong Brewing. Terrific little local beer that they do every season, and big fan of it, 8%. And then if I get done with this heavy guy, I've got a Legion Juicy J regular IPA. If you're familiar with the Charlotte area, you know that is a staple across every single bar here in Charlotte. So that's what I'm drinking. Curtis, what do you got, man?
Yeah, I got one of the best beers ever made in eternity here, and that's Budweiser, the Clydesdales. That will be on out during the Super Bowl. King of beers for a reason. It was in the fridge. Me and Ricky were talking before. We didn't go out and, you know, go get something special this time around. We'll get back to that. But yeah, this is what I had, so we're going with it. I also wanted to mention, I did want to shout out too, because I apologize. I'm terrible co-host, Ricky. But you guys, you and Edgar, who was in the chat, your guys' show, Draft Crush, I watched the first episode. Go check them out on YouTube. Give them some love and subscribe as well. They're giving you guys all the draft content leading up to the draft in April in Green Bay, and they've done a mock couple. I don't know if you guys did a mock draft this last episode, but you did a mock draft your first one. I'm sure you'll do many more. Sounds like they got some great guests coming up. Mm-hmm. So subscribe to their YouTube channel. That's also some awesome content you guys can get when we're not on the air as well. So just shout out them.
And Bryson put it in the chat here too that we do have the super chat option. So if there is something that you vehemently agree or vehemently disagree with us, or if you have a particular question, or you just want to say something vulgar to either of us and you want it to be on the screen so that everyone else can see the shit talking that you have going on, by all means, man, you can shit talk us for as low as $1.99. You can send us $100 and call us pieces of shit. Whatever you want to do, we have a price. Send $100, man. We'll be $100 piece of shit for the night. There's no problem with that. I have no pride. So send the super chats away, man. If you have questions, very, very interested to see what the chat has to say tonight after almost a month away. Edgar poses the question here with the Kupp and Myles Garrett situation. Says, I'm down for Kupp and Myles Garrett. Bigger question is, are they down to go to Carolina? Curtis, that was my thing, right? Is that I think that was my Myles Garrett hold up. Is that pretty much how you feel about both of them too? Is that you would take either?
Yeah, I don't think Kupp has a choice. I don't think Kupp has a choice. I also don't think Garrett has a choice. Do the Browns do right by him? Maybe. And I don't know if he would want to be here. I mean, that's the big question. I think all of us want answered. Like, I want someone to ask that. I was hoping he's been on Radio Row or whatever they want to call it this week at the Super Bowl. So I really wish someone would just flat out ask him that. Maybe we need to get that one guy who was on Twitter. I can't think of his handle. I apologize, but he did some great work during the Senior Bowl. He was literally asking every prospect, "Did you visit with the Panthers?" We just need that guy to go out there.
Amani with the real ball watcher. Yeah.
We just need him to go there and just flat out ask Myles Garrett, is he interested?
Yeah, hey, shout out Amani too, by the way. That's a terrific independent dude right there that does his own stuff. He writes for Cat Crave now too. But he's terrific, man. Real ball watcher, great scouting profiles and stuff on his channel as well. Bryson asked me if I'm doing my top 150 draft rankings again this year. Last year I published my very first big board. Yeah, Bryson, I am doing that again this year. And then Edgar and I are also teaming up to do a Panthers specific board that will have historical correlations, physical profiles, who they've met with, confirmed meetings, top 30, Senior Bowl, Shrine Bowl, fits, scheme fits, connections, all those kinds of things. So we will have 2 different publications this year, one being Carolina Panthers and then one just me spouting off my random rankings.
Real quick, Ricky, because I've seen this in the chat a couple times, and I know Josh Norris, who I love, great follow as well online. He had proposed a Garrett Wilson trade. I didn't see it. I don't know if you saw it, but he proposed Carolina for trading. Anyone in the chat who's seen it, just send us the parameters. I don't know what it was. But real quick, just your thoughts on adding Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, if chat can give us those details, that would be awesome, because I have not seen that. It has been a busy few days. But so I'm in the same boat with Garrett Wilson that I'm kind of at with Myles Garrett to an extent. Here's Edgar. Garrett Wilson plus pick 109 for Carolina's pick 8. I do it in a second. I mean, who are you drafting at 8 that is going to give you Garrett Wilson and give you Garrett Wilson immediately? I mean, really think about that. If you're drafting a wide receiver, you're talking about either Teteroa McMillan, Luther Burden, Matthew Golden, Emeka Egbuka, and they're all fine prospects. But Garrett Wilson is a proven NFL player. He's a proven one, in my opinion. Terrific route runner. Would be great with an anticipatory thrower like Bryce Young. Has a speed to get vertical, take off the top of the defense. And he's also a terrific route runner that can kill you on the underneath and the intermediate. And imagine how that helps a guy like Xavier Legette, right? Like, you're not asking him to be the dominant one. You've got to let these guys grow into their positions naturally sometimes instead of forcing them. If they're not the alpha and they're not ready to do that, let them grow into it. I think that's what Garrett Wilson does, and I think Garrett Wilson, he's young enough. Is he going to require money? Yeah. I'm going to break some news here, Curtis, if you don't mind. Good football players get paid good money. It's the facts of life. These guys make millions and millions and millions of dollars. If you want good football players, you are going to have to pay them. You have to. Good teams have good football players, and guess what they do with them? They pay them. We just brought in Brant Tillis to be our salary cap guru because of the work that he did in Kansas City, and also his talent evaluation and understanding the front office of an NFL. Why are we, as fans, preoccupying ourselves with the financial ramifications of bringing in terrific football players? That's Brant Tillis. He gets paid a lot of money to do that. The Panthers don't pay me a dime. So you know what I'm going to tell them? Get everybody you can. Form a fucking army. Like, what are we saying here, dude? Give me the elite players, every single position. Go get them. Would you trade away all of your first-round picks for the next 10 years for 10 elite players? Because I would. I would give up draft picks in a heartbeat for proven good players. And that's what we're staring down here. Myles Garrett and Garrett Wilson are good players.
Yeah, I would send that trade in yesterday. I'm all for that. I think Garrett Wilson is elite at his position, and I do think he is a number one. And, man, I'm just seeing the throws from Bryce Young to him in my mind, right? Like that gets me excited. If they could pull that off, I would be very, very excited. Ricky, I'm going to throw this on you real quick, and then we're getting to Senior Bowl. I get it. We're almost half hour in here, but I did want to mention this because I know you commented on it online, and then I haven't really touched it, but I'm just kind of curious. Your thoughts on Cam Newton's comments. If folks haven't seen that yet, basically Cam Newton said he wouldn't trade the MVP for a Super Bowl ring. Ricky, I know where you're at on this one, and I've I tend to agree with you on this. So I'll let you go first, and then I'll jump in.
So I don't have an issue at the core with him not being gung ho about getting rid of an MVP award. That's not my issue. It's a tremendous accolade. It's a tremendous accomplishment. It does speak to your individual talent and ability to be the truck and not the trailer, right? So I don't have a problem with him being proud of that award. My trepidation with it came more from the reasoning. And he said it's because at least that shows that I did my job, that I did my part to win that MVP. My train of thought here, if your team was 15-1 when you won that MVP, correct? If your team had been, let's say you had the same year Joe Burrow had this year, but your defense was garbage water and you couldn't win all the games, you were under 500. If you didn't go to the Super Bowl that year, but you still had the same statistical production, do you think you win that MVP? Because I don't. I don't think you've ever seen an MVP win the award on a losing team. The MVP is an award that typically goes to a team that is contending, right? And Cam Newton was responsible for a huge chunk of us contending and getting to the Super Bowl. I am not discrediting that one bit, but saying that it shows he did his job, whereas a Super Bowl would have shown that everyone did theirs. I think everyone kind of had to do theirs at least to a relatively high extent to get to 15-1 and put you in that conversation as well. So I think it's a slight discredit and disservice to the players with him on that team. I'm not mad at him, though, for wanting that award. It's an exclusive club. There are Super Bowl winners that people will point to. And before I pass it to you, Curtis, I just want to say the argument about, like, would you rather be Cam Newton with an MVP or would you rather be Trent Dilfer with a Super Bowl win? Who is telling Cam Newton he has to give back his career and trade it with Trent Dilfer just for swapping out a Super Bowl and an MVP? That's not the case. His career is still his career. You still did every single thing. Your rookie year, you were still the most prolific rookie quarterback we've seen before CJ Stroud and Jaden Daniels came in and started waving it around, right? Like, we have seen how terrific and how great Cam Newton is. You're not having to give that up. The question was, with your career in hindsight, would you just swap those awards? Not swap your career. You don't have to be Brad Johnson because you won a Super Bowl, for crying out loud. And Brad Johnson doesn't get to be Cam Newton if he got an MVP one off. Like, you're still exactly who you are. So for me, man, and as a fan, of course, I want the Super Bowl because that means more to me. I'm a fan. I don't think it's him giving back to the organization by swapping it out. I think that was just him saying, hey, look, I'm very proud of my MVP, so I want to keep it. Good for him.
Yeah, I mean, as a fan, obviously, I want the Super Bowl without a doubt. But like putting myself in his shoes and knowing how I've been on, like, I'm not at all comparing anything, but when I'm in on a sports team, like, I wouldn't want the individual award over us winning a championship. That would never cross my mind, just me personally, and how competitive I am in a sport, on a sport team. So that kind of drew me the wrong way a little bit, because that just personally, that's just not how I am. Like, I would want team success over my own. And then I just hate because it feeds into the haters of Cam Newton of, like, he's all about himself and selfish, and that just feeds into that. And that was disappointing as well. That kind of annoyed me. But yeah, I just go ahead.
I'm glad that he's open and genuine, though, to your point, what you're saying, because, like, it feeds into the idea and persona that people seem to put on Cam. I am glad that he's very open and honest about the way that he feels. I think that that's rare, and it's what makes him as good as he is at this TV thing, man, because he is terrific at it. He's almost as good on TV as he was on the football field, which is remarkable because he's one of the best football players I've ever watched. But there are some moments, man, maybe he gets excited and just doesn't phrase things the right way. But if that was phrased exactly how he wanted it to, I'm with you that I would love to think in a perfect world where everything is rainbows and flowers, that the camaraderie and the team element and fighting for the guy next to you mattered as much, if not more, to him than fighting for his individual place in history.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Let's get into the Senior Bowl. We got a lot to talk about. And
Yeah, Curtis hit me up and was like, "Hey, you got a couple guys that you want to talk to or talk about at the Senior Bowl?" He's like, "I got a few, so I just want to, see if you had anyone." I was like, "Yeah, I got one or two or something like that." I was like, "How many you got?" And he basically sent me the roster of the Senior Bowl, and he's like, "I want to talk about him." So I hope y'all are ready. Buckle up.
Well, honestly, and I'll put this out there right away, is I didn't watch every practice. I think I watched the first day and part of the second day, and then we were on vacation, and I ended up actually watching the Senior Bowl these last couple of days because I couldn't watch it live. So I just put in some brief notes on guys that stuck out as we went on. So there's just little tidbits. I'm not here to give you a 20-minute spiel on one dude. I ain't doing that. Ricky probably has way more shit than I do on most of these guys. But let's get into it because we do have a lot. I think we have 12 guys to really touch on, and I'm sure there will be a couple others that I want to sprinkle in because I know there's been talk about some of these other. I'll shut the hell up.
Here we go.
So I didn't put these guys in like any specific order, but I did put them in groupings. So like I put all the edge rushers, D tackles, linebackers, corners. We got a couple wide receivers to talk about. So let's get into that
couple
right
lawn
off.
Maintenance guys, couple good janitors. Yeah.
So let's start on Mike Green. This is folks that don't know. This is Bryson's darling. I would call. I go with draft darling. You guys go with draft crush. I've always went with draft darling. I don't know why. And Bryson.
Is it a Midwest thing? It's a Midwest thing, isn't it?
Yeah. But Bryson went to Marshall. Understandably, he would like this guy. I get it. So I'm a little disappointed he's not here to talk about him tonight. Maybe he'll chime in on the chat. But thoughts on Mike Green, Ricky? We've all seen that the highlight play per se, where he just bowled over, and the guys escaped me. One of the top tackles in the draft,
Josh Connerly Jr., the offensive tackle out of Oregon.
What are your thoughts on Mike Green? Because I know there has been some, I want to say, negativity on what he can do in the run game. The guy obviously, 16 or 17 sacks last year at Marshall. But what are your thoughts on him? Is this what did you see from him in the Senior Bowl? And is this a guy you think that could potentially be there? Or, I mean, Carolina could pick at 8.
So I'll go to Zach Griffin's comment here in the chat before I do it, because I think that he sums up probably what a public consensus is about Mike Green, right? Mike Green was the biggest winner of the Senior Bowl. If we don't trade 8 for some of those dream players, then I'd love them to pick him at 8. That is a sentiment that I am seeing more and more and more, especially among Carolina Panthers fans, right? Now, national pundits have also been doting on Mike Green and the week that he had, or let's say 3 days that he had, because he also did bail out after practice and did not play in the game. He kind of essentially did the, hey, you guys have seen what I got here. I put it on the table. You guys liked it. I'm going to head home. And Shamar Stewart did the same thing as him. So it's not just him. And it's a common occurrence. I'm not crapping on him for doing that. That is something that players do. You ask, is this a player that the Carolina Panthers would likely have interest in? One of the things we talked about with that Panthers specific board, big board, is physical parameters, thresholds, historical preference. Mike Green does not fit any of those for the Carolina Panthers. I will just start by saying that. That does not mean that I don't think he's a good football player. I have not finished my rankings, and last year I put out a few positional rankings before I put out my board and before the combine. This year I'm trying to practice patience, but if you know me at all, I usually give out my Christmas gifts around like the 10th or 12th of December. So like it is very difficult for me to keep cool shit to myself. But Mike Green right now is hovering around edge 3, edge 4 for me. He's in that ballpark range. And that's with me liking a few of these other edge players a good deal. Mike Green brings a phenomenal pass rush arsenal. He's got a pretty well-stocked bag of moves. I would say 90% of them are speed rush moves, but he has shown, and he showed it at the Senior Bowl, his ability to go speed to power on his rushes. He does have bull rush. He has a nice long arm that he's flashed every now and then. Level of competition, I still think is a fair question, and people will point to, well, he played Ohio State and he had a sack against Ohio State. He did, and it was a remarkable sack. There are one-off examples of people winning reps. Let's not forget that Iku Leota completely ran over who was the offensive guard for the Colts, one of the best, Quentin Nelson. He bulldozed Quentin Nelson. Does that mean that Iku Leota is a much better player than Quentin Nelson? Not at all. It means he won that rep. And I'm not saying that Mike Green is a bad player because he won a rep. That's foolish too, right? But Josh Connerly, he jumped out on a quick jump set. Bet he wish he didn't do that immediately after getting there because Mike Green got inside of him, right? He got right inside of his chest and he put him on his ass. Like he was scolding him like he was a toddler. He sat him down for a talking. And good for him. It was the most impressive viral clip. Everyone oohed and awed about it. My questions with Mike Green are more about holding up at the point of attack in the rush game. On our episode of Draft Crush, we talked about some draft crushes from the Senior Bowl, and we spoke a little bit about Mike Green as a bonus, and we showed some clips.
He got stonewalled by a guy on.
He got stopped by a couple. He did.
Yeah.
And that's okay too, but also those drills in the Senior Bowl are kind of tilted for the defensive players, like that offensive defensive line, those drills, those are tilted for the defensive players. Like they should have better success rate than the offensive linemen. I would have loved to have seen him in the game situation to see how he held up in run support. But I don't think this is not a player, though, that I would be scared of taking, because what I do think he brings is a bona fide pass rush. And I mean bona fide, man. Like there are shades of Von Miller in the way that he bends, and his length is not the exact same. But Von Miller didn't have the Myles Garrett go-go gadget arms. He didn't have the Will Anderson arms. And Will Anderson is a comp that is floating around there because their size isn't super different. Will Anderson is a much more powerful player. But if Mike Green is able to continue building power and adding weight to that frame, if he ends up playing around 255, almost 260, that's a hell of a playing weight for a guy with his speed, his bend, and athleticism. This is a remarkable prospect, and I think that he's one that should be in the conversation at 8. But I'm not rushing to this judgment that he is the best player that will be available at 8.
I like how you put that. I do agree. I agree with you. I do think he needs to be in the conversation. And wasn't the knock too, like he was going to be coming in the Senior Bowl in like the 230s, and he came in at 251. So like,
yeah, there was some measurement that was out there. I think it was like a Shrine Bowl measurement, which is weird because he wasn't in the Shrine Bowl. But it said he was 237. Yeah. And that would have been a huge problem because that's super light in the pants, right? Mm-hmm. But 251, man, I mean that's a real good weight for him because his playing weight that they had him listed at was like 245.
Yeah, and you talked about you talked about the measurements. I remember someone had tweeted out, some pundit, they posted his arms, and I retweeted it and it was like, oh, so you mean he's not going to the Carolina Panthers because Carolina historically under this regime and under Evero hasn't gone below like 33 and a quarter or something like that.
That's right.
And so that right there is like, now do they change course because now they're like, well, fuck it, this defense ain't working, we're just going to go out and get guys and we're not going to base it? That could be. So I don't think that's out of the realm, but I do like you said, Ricky, I think I've heard the Von Miller comps with him. I do think he is a talent at that pass rusher position. I do need to see more of what he's done. I haven't done 4 or 5 games of this guy's. I need to go back and actually look at some of that, and that's what I'll be doing over these next couple of weeks, is looking at more in depth on these guys and their games. But I mean, he's got a special talent when it comes to going after the quarterback. There's no doubt about that.
Getting after the quarterback is a premier skill in the NFL, right? Like disrupting the quarterback is one of the biggest objectives in today's NFL. This guy has that. So like any knock on him that I may say is just objective criticism. It's not me saying that I don't like him. I like Mike Green a lot, but there are questions about, is he a designated pass rusher right now in his career? Like if you pick him at 8, it's possible. And so then you start talking about, is that the value that you should get out of a number 8 overall pick, a guy that is potentially only playing on obvious passing downs? And that's a fair question, I think. And when you look at Evero's scheme, I mean, look, man, that's where the length comes in place. He wants an edge setter. He wants a guy who is able to hold up at that point of attack. And those are quite literally the questions that people have about Mike Green. I am with you on maybe we should say to hell with the system. Like Evero's probably 8 really bad defensive games away from being on the hottest of hot seats. So do you pass up on a player who maybe would be the apple of another good defensive coordinator's eye just for the sake of your defensive coordinator who he's already kind of had a few positional coaches as scapegoats the past few weeks? Do you really pass up on someone that somebody else may be very, very high on just to appease that person's system?
I don't think they do.
We did it with DJ Johnson, man. DJ Johnson was a perfect system player, right? Mm-hmm. And it just has not worked out even a little bit. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know, man. I like Mike Green. Like him a lot.
No, and I'm just saying, like, I don't think they go to that ideology this year because, like, when you're a coordinator, it usually goes. We've seen it in Carolina many times. Joe Brady, it goes position coach is fired, then the coordinator fired, and that's just how it works. So, like, we're on that last rung. He's holding on, and I mean that's coming from a guy who likes Evero. Like that you need to just go out and get good football players, and he needs to figure out a way to fit them in. Let's go to the next guy here. Again, this is not in any specific order, only on grouping. So you mentioned him, Shamar Stewart. Ricky, you brought me onto this guy. You had tweeted about him. I don't know. It had been a couple weeks ago, maybe. And I went back and watched some of his games. And I do think this guy has potential. The biggest thing for me, and I don't know if you watched the LSU game, and I know we're kind of going off script with the Senior Bowl, but when he went up against that top tackle out of LSU, man, I'm bad with names.
Will Campbell.
Yeah, he didn't do a whole lot. He really didn't. His two big plays in that game were when he wasn't going up against him. So he held his own. And again, it's one game. I get it. I watched Notre Dame game and he flashed. I mean, he had some really good plays in that one. But this guy, again, I know his arms are shorter, but I feel like fits the mold a little bit more for Carolina.
The measurements that you have there on that sheet are actually incorrect for him. His arms are actually extremely long. He is an athletic. He's an athletic specimen. Shamar Stewart, I'll give you the confirmed measurements for him.
God, fire me with these graphics
because I have my database up. So luckily I have like all of the database numbers up. Shamar Stewart came in at 6'5", just a hair over 6'5", 281 pounds. 9 1/8 inch hands, 34 1/4 arm length, and 83 1/2 inch wingspan. So
I'm gonna just take that down. We'll talk about him.
I don't want.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
No,
I was
like,
good. His measurements I thought fit what Carolina wanted. So
100%.
I wasn't talking out of my ass there.
No, he's a supersized edge, supercharged big guy. The impressive thing about him is that for 6'5", 280 pounds, he is explosive. His acceleration is insane. Now at Texas A&M, his production was extremely underwhelming. I believe he had 4 total sacks in the 3 years that he played. Tackle for losses is also underwhelming. But you look at the pressures that he generated, and they're a good indicator of his ability to be disruptive. And he had a ton of pressures, man. He had a good win percentage on his pass rush rate. He also, though, at Texas A&M, man, there is a weird thing because I'm a big fan of Nick Scorton, who is also an edge player over there at Texas A&M, who was a transfer out of Purdue his first year there. And his production tailed off. He played at a bigger size, and he had a lot of run stop responsibilities. They really emphasize that setting the edge and holding that point of attack on the run. And I think that's where some of it comes from. Now, with Shamar Stewart, what I will say, his bag isn't very full. He won a lot based off of his athleticism and just natural advantage of being stronger and faster than the guy across from him. And that works a lot more in college than it typically works in the NFL. We see a lot of really big, fast, long, strong guys go into the NFL at a high rate and end up kind of fizzling out because they don't refine that technique. They don't develop that arsenal and that array of counters. And kind of like, you have to be playing chess when you're on that offensive defensive line battle. You want them guessing, because when they guess, you get them off balance. When you get them off balance, you counter, right? That is what you want to do. I posted a clip of Nick Scorton doing exactly that against Notre Dame today. Set up with an outside chop on the outside speed rush, and he got pushed behind. He still got the quarterback off his spot, but then the very next rep, he set up that same left tackle for Notre Dame. He went to the outside. He put his hand out for the chop, and as soon as that offensive tackle bit, he spun right back onto the inside and got the sack. You don't see a lot of that recognition and that IQ, that football awareness with Shamar Stewart. You see a lot more overpowering. That doesn't mean that he is a bare cupboard either, though, when it comes to his pass rush. This guy has a lot of talent. He's also 20 years old. I think that for a team that is hurting in the run defense, he makes a lot of immediate sense there. Now, as far as his pass rush at the NFL, I think that there is work to be done, and I think there's development that will need to take place. And I think that it could be a year or two before you see returns, and the returns come if he is very committed and the coaching staff has a vision for how to use a guy like him.
That's my concern with a guy like that, though, at pick 8. Like, you need a guy who's going to come in and make, and I'm not saying he wouldn't make an immediate impact, but be like, literally make an immediate impact. Like, they need a guy who's going to come in and wreak havoc on offensive lines. And he seems to me, at least at this point, more of you're going off traits. Like, it's like a typical Carolina like draft pick. Like, they love the out of this world traits and what this guy could become. Right. But like, they need an impact player now. So that's my concern with a guy like him. And I apologize with the traits. I was trying to change it while you were talking.
No, you're good. The one thing I'll point at too is because I have seen people bring this up about DJ Johnson and Shamar Stewart and saying this is another DJ Johnson. The one thing I will preach here, as far as just a little bit of hold up now, whoa, pull the reins back here, hit the brakes. This guy played the position at a pretty high level in college, and he played it for 3 years in college. DJ Johnson played outside linebacker, defensive end, edge, whatever you want to call it, for 3/4 of a season in college. He was a tight end. And as far as an athlete, as far as a specimen, he's nowhere near it. As far as a productive run defender, he's nowhere near it. Shamar Stewart is a very good player, but he is a work in progress as far as, can you tell me what he's going to be in the NFL? And that takes projection. A lot of really good players take a little bit of projection, man. I don't know that we're in a position as a franchise to take a player that you need to develop for 2 years to figure out what they are, with the potential that they could end up being simply an edge setter, right? I don't know that you do that with pick 8. Now, if you trade back, man, we can open up this conversation for a ton of prospects. I also don't think that 8 is out of the realm of possibilities for a guy like Shamar Stewart, who, once he goes to the combine and he couples that with the week that he just had at the Senior Bowl, and then you start looking at his tape. When I tell you this get off for a guy who's 6'5", 281 pounds, watch him get off the line of scrimmage. Watch how quickly he is in the backfield. Watch how many times it is a simple long arm of holding a man who's just as big as him, if not bigger, across from him, and just saying, hey, I'm going to go introduce you to your friend back there, and just taking him directly back to that quarterback. It's impressive, man. And there is a reason that NFL teams are salivating over him. The Panthers need to be very smart about what they specifically are doing, though.
All right, let's go to the next guy. I blame this site because I went back and looked, and I had the right shit in there from the site I took it from. The site was wrong, so just throwing that out there. Let's go to this next guy. This was one, honestly, Ricky, I didn't expect to have on the list, but he flashed in the game. Like he made
Yep.
some damn good plays in this Senior Bowl, and I'm like, man, who's this LSU guy?
Yeah.
So he just kept flashing for me throughout this game, coming off the edge, and um, obviously not like a top pick for them, but I do think later in the rounds, this is a guy to keep an eye on because he made plays, and I think that's that's important. And I do think we've learned in past, like Carolina values the Senior Bowl, and when
Mm-hmm.
guys are showing up in there, you got to take notice.
Mm-hmm.
So this was one for me. He does fit the measurements. Hopefully, I have these right. Damn it, I'm going to worry about it every time we pull up a slide now. But he fits that mold for measurements for them. So this could be a guy to keep an eye on in the later rounds.
Yeah.
And it's just someone for me that I didn't expect to jump off, and here we are talking about him.
Tell you the funny thing is that his running mate at LSU is actually my preferred edge player out of LSU in this draft class, Braden Swinson. I like him a whole lot, and I think that he is a tremendous player that can give some really good value late day 2, early day 3. Sevion Jones, this guy is what's the right way of saying this without trying to sound like borderline disrespectful? A shade of Shamar Stewart-esque when you talk about like the length, the measurements, the run stopping ability, the ability to set the edge, but being very raw as a pass rusher. I think that Jones brings understanding of the position, and he has created some good havoc at LSU. He has good pressure numbers, but I'm not entirely sold that his strength is where I would want it to be for a guy his size. I see him get moved a little bit. He's a big guy, but I see him get moved a little bit more than you would anticipate a guy with those long arms that can kind of ward off that offensive tackle or that blocker that he gets into. He could ward that off a little bit more, and he should have a little bit better of an anchor. I do see him get displaced a little bit more on film. Now, I have not done a full evaluation of Sevion Jones. It has been more when I've been watching Braden Swinson. So to be completely fair, I don't want to give a hard line take on him because I think that would be a little irresponsible of me. But from the Senior Bowl, he did kind of turn some heads, I think, and I think probably got a lot of people going back into that film to watch that LSU edge group.
Oh, I'm skipping ahead here. Let's move on to I don't know if I want to attempt this name.
Oluwafemi Oladejo, and he goes Edgar. This is one of Edgar's draft crushes. He goes by the nickname O2, which is pretty cool.
Well, there you go. There's some little man, Edgar. You're getting shout outs left and right on here.
I know. Look at you. Yeah, he's just such a nice guy. It's hard not to say something good about him, right? If it makes you feel any better, Curtis, he also goes by Femi, so you could just call him Femi Oladejo.
Femi. There you go. Femi. I'll just call him Femi. We'll go with that. This was another guy for me, Ricky, who I think he had 2 sacks in this game, in the Senior Bowl game. I mean, he was, and the sacks don't even, like, this guy was getting pressure constantly in the backfield in this game. There was one play where he got through the left tackle and then he got through the running back and still made the sack. I think it was his second one late in the 4th quarter. But this guy, when he was in there, I think he was 99 when he was playing at the Senior Bowl. He was dominating, dude. He was dominating guys on that line. So he got me excited. I want to do a little bit more deep dive into this guy and, look at his actual film from his days at UCLA. But he got me excited watching him. Again, he's not going to be in the pick 8 here. Some of these guys aren't going to be that. But he's a guy, when you're looking at these later rounds, if they don't go edge at round 1, you look at some of these later, the day 2 and 3 picks, I think people – we don't talk enough about those later rounds with some of these prospects. We're always, and I to a fault, I'm that way too.
Right.
And get infatuated with just the first pick or the second pick. But these are some guys to familiarize yourself with, because I did think he played real well in this game. And I'm really excited to dive into what he has in his toolbox moving forward.
When you look at him and you see the length there again in the weight for him at around 6'3", but 261, 33.5-inch arms, 6'8" 3/4" wingspan. Those are the measurements that make sense for the Carolina Panthers. I will say Edgar brings it up here that he pays me well, so I'll talk about him again here. Edgar, when he was discussing O2 Femi, he mentioned that he began as a off-ball linebacker, so he has some experience in that. He has some reps in coverage. That is a versatility that should be coveted across the NFL, not just with Carolina. But I think that this guy is kind of tapping or scratching that surface as an edge rusher. This was his first year really with a decent amount of pressure production. I believe he had 7 sacks. I was asked today on Twitter actually about him because we posted Femi as one of the draft crushes in that episode. And I was asked, what round would you be comfortable taking him? I think, Curtis, what you said, I think is the truth, man. I think that he's a early day 3 guy, most likely, because there is a lack of production. NFL teams want to see production, or they want to see really high-end traits. I'm not saying that O2 doesn't have good traits, but he doesn't have jump off the page measurables and athletic testing. I'm looking forward to seeing what he does at the combine, because that always helps prospects in this range too. When you're trying to kind of differentiate between a big group of players, right? When you're looking at it, you're like, is this a late 2nd round guy or is this a early 4th, right? Like, there is always this big group, specifically in this draft, man. I think that the meat and potatoes of this draft is honestly after pick 25, pick 28, all the way up to pick 75 to 80. There is just
it's such a deep draft defensively. Yeah. And this is the year to have defensive problems.
That's right. There's a gaggle of prospects, man, that make a ton of sense in that area, but there's not a lot of premier talent at the top. So once we start trying to like separate some of these guys, it's going to be important when you look at the measurables and the athletic testing, because it might answer some questions. Never go into the combine or Senior Bowl trying to form an opinion. That would be the advice that I would give. When you go into the combine or the Senior Bowl, let it bolster, let it reinforce, or let it bring up questions that you can go back and evaluate and figure out for yourself. If you watch film and you say, man, this guy just doesn't look very fast. Like, is that his play style? Is that what they're asking him to do? Are they telling him to be a little bit more of like a stalker instead of charging? Or is it he literally has physical limitations? And then you go and you watch at the combine, or you get these measurements and you see, and you're like, wow, actually, you know what, man, he is capable of it. So if you're capable of something, then coaching becomes a very imperative part of that conversation. So O2, I think, had a terrific week. I think he should be firmly on the radar for a late day 2, early day 3 pick.
Yeah, I'm just reading. So you said he went. What was the nicknames you said? Because I'm reading. He
O2,
goes by O2 Joe. O2 Joe. I like that.
O2 Joe.
Get this guy on Carolina.
Yeah, see, look at you. And he already has little shades of blue there. Like, he already looks good in blue.
So I was reading that apparently he was an alt-ball linebacker, and maybe you said this already. I don't know. I was doing some reading. I apologize. But he switched to edge in 2024. He had a really long conversation with Mike Tomlin at the Senior Bowl with, that's a pretty good guy who can evaluate talent on the
not bad.
Look at the Steelers, what they've done defensively in the draft. So man, this is a guy I'm really interested in. I'm glad to hear that Edgar really likes this guy. I'm excited to see more of his tape as the weeks go on here, because I do think he has potential to be a Carolina pick. Let's move on though. Let's go to the next guy here. That's David Walker. This was someone, Ricky, you had mentioned to me to add to our list. So break it down for us.
Huge fan. Before I get into David Walker, because I will speak on him for a second, I do got to go back into the chat because there was a couple of things that were dropped in there as well. Carter brings up here real quickly. First, he peppers a compliment in there at the beginning, which I'm a huge fan of this style, Carter. When you leave a compliment first, huge fan. Ricky, you are football smart. What's the most important position on offense and defense? Just in general, because I got a specific opinion. And Carter believes that it's the center on offense and the defensive tackle on defense. Makes sense. I understand what you're saying there, Carter. You're building from the inside out. Trenches matter, right? I'm going to just be a very obvious person here when I answer and say quarterback is the most important position on offense, because when you see these NFL teams, the premier NFL teams have an answer at quarterback. There is no longer Trent Dilfer doesn't go in and win Super Bowls anymore in the NFL. You could point to Nick Foles and say, well, what about that? That was also on the shoulders of Carson Wentz for the majority of that season. And Carson Wentz was a top, pick in the draft who had been playing at a very high MVP caliber level. Now, you can have guys come in and help you for a game or two, and that's what Nick Foles is capable of doing. I'm going to say quarterback there. And as for defense, man, I'm kind of stuck because I don't have a specific position on defense as most important, but I believe a terrific corner or an edge rusher are the most valuable in today's NFL because I think that passing has become king in the NFL. Now they're starting to veer a little bit more to the ground game again. I love the interior pressure that some defensive tackles are getting, but that's some defensive tackles. Those are the great defensive tackles. Edge players typically have a little bit more of an impact. Curtis, you got an opinion on that, man? What's the two most important positions?
I'm very similar. I think quarterback's the obvious one on offense. I mean, without a doubt, you need a QB in this league to survive. Defensively, I would probably lean edge rusher. I think corner's really important too. So one of those. Probably, I would think edge, honestly, over corner. I would probably go edge rusher. Zach mentioned something. We'll get to Walter Nolan here shortly. But Ricky, fire away on Walker here.
David Walker. So small school, Central Arkansas. This guy has been ultra productive. You look at his tackles for loss, pressures, sacks. I believe he had 16 sacks this past season. The question that I had with David Walker, right? Because I had heard about him last pre-draft period. So I started digging into him then and fell in love. I mean, he's just my kind of player. This is a powerful bully of a pass rusher. But watching him, my question, kind of similar to Mike Green, almost to an extent, was does it all translate from the level of competition that he's playing at to the next level? So the Senior Bowl was a huge opportunity, in my opinion, for a guy like David Walker, who could go in and show against the top level competition, because the offensive line at the Senior Bowl, look, this isn't like the quarterbacks that normally don't participate at the combine. The offensive linemen that you saw at the Senior Bowl, those are the creme de la creme in the draft class. Those are some of the best guys that you're going to see get drafted in late April. So going up against them provided a ginormous opportunity for guys like David Walker. And from what I saw, everything I love about him, his power, his speed, his pass rush plan. I mean, this guy's got a bag, man. He's got counters. He is just such a hot motor player. I want that on my team, man. I want that bully ball. David Walker was moving people around. Now, he got stonewalled once. The question with him, he's got short arms, sub 32-inch arms. Those are shorter, right? What I love about him, you look at him, he's 6 foot and a half, a little bit over, 267 pounds. The natural leverage that this guy has as a pass rusher, which he's aware of and he uses well, especially with those short arms. He is very aware of his body and his limitations and what he needs to do to succeed and how to win. This guy has terrific natural leverage. Somebody had mentioned Elvis Dumerville as a comp for him. It's not terrible. I don't hate it. The guy that I was talking about, now their sizes aren't exactly the same, but the tenacity they play with and the strength that they play with, I don't know if this name will be familiar to everyone. Cameron Wake, a guy that used to play for the Miami Dolphins that racked up double-digit sacks multiple seasons. He began his career as an undrafted free agent, didn't make it his first year, ended up playing in the CFL, came back here, and they convinced him to stop playing outside linebacker and to just be a down pass rusher, just be a pass rush guy. And he dominated. I think that's what David Walker can give you. Again, I think that he is a late day 2, early day 3 pick because of the level of competition. I would be entirely comfortable, and this is just me personally, man, because I believe in this guy. I would be entirely comfortable spending a late second to an early third on David Walker. I just think that you're not going to be able to. Growing up here in Charlotte, man, I was a huge Hornets fan, right? There was a VHS, me wanting to play basketball as a young kid. Turns out I'm not all that athletic and not terrific enough to play basketball, and I'm not very tall. So that didn't pan out for me. Football was much more my thing. Lacrosse, even baseball, like those things worked out for me. But I had a VHS from Muggsy Bogues that was called Don't Tell Me No, right? That's what I think of with David Walker. Do not give this guy any more chips on his shoulder. The guy's walking around with a party-sized bag of Doritos up there. He's got every chip in the damn grocery store on his shoulder. This dude right here has the fire and desire to win in the NFL, and I would bet on it every day, man. And he proved to me that the questions that I had, he proved to me that they were just questions, and that I don't need to worry about it.
There you go. I'm going to move along since we do got a lot of them, and I don't know a ton about this guy, so I'm not going to try to lie to you folks. So
I like that.
I think Ricky did very well with David Walker. This is one of my guys. I really like Aeneas Peebles. I know he's undersized, so that's what gives me hesitation with Carolina because they are big on measurements. But he was fun to watch at the Senior Bowl. He's got a burst off the line. He's shooting the gaps. He had made a really nice play in the backfield during the game. He's got some twitchy hands to him a little bit. But I don't know. I don't know if it's his story. The guy, he came from a football family. I had tweeted something out that Tom Pelissero put out. I think it was the first day. His grandfather was a first-round pick by the Oilers in the 70s. And he ended up his grandfather, I think, played at NC Central. And then his father was a 4-year letter winner at App State. So, like, he has Carolina roots to the core. And he jumped off the page for me when I watched him at the Senior Bowl. Again, undersized, so that does concern me. I don't know if Carolina will touch him because of that. And I don't know if they met with him at all at the Senior Bowl. I'm sure Ricky or Edgar can help me on that one. But he was just someone that I enjoyed watching during this game. And again, I think this is key too, is going into these, like Ricky mentioned, going into the Senior Bowls, the Combine, even the Pro Days, with just an open mind. Like, these are some guys that I had no idea about, and I'm like, holy shit, like I really like the way he played. So, yeah, that was just kind of my breakdown. I thought he had some really nice plays, both in practice throughout the week and then also in that game.
Yeah, and I would encourage, so I won't go super deep into Aeneas Peebles. I am a fan of him. I'm a fan of the edge player that plays next to him, Antoine Ryland Powell, or Antoine Powell Ryland. I apologize, APR. I think that both of them offer this undersized element where they can get after the passer. What I'll say that always bothers me, man, with the Carolina Panthers specifically right now, I see these guys that I'm very interested in, very intrigued by, right? That have obvious winning skill sets that would translate at the next level. And I always have in the back of my mind, Curtis, this idea of like, yeah, but the Panthers will have no interest. Yeah. Doesn't matter if they're good or not. Like, I don't care how much I personally like them or what they grade out for me, right? I sit there and I see these measurements and I'm like, well, he can't play 3-tech. He can't play 5-tech. Look at his arms. They'll never trust him. So, like, when is he going to see the field? Like, now, the one thing that gives me a little bit of hope, and this is an awful thing to say, is maybe they look at this and say, man, he is wildly undersized. And Evero looks at him and goes, nose tackle, because we got Shai Tuttle, who's right about the same teeny tiny size. So
well, I was honestly looking that up while we were talking, trying to see what the measurements were with Shai Tuttle. Because I'm like, maybe there's a shot.
Maybe, right? Maybe some of these undersized guys is like Evero's thing, man. I don't know. But, like, it does bother me, and it is like one of those things that grinds my gears, that I find these players, man, that I love to grade out really high in my evaluation process. And look, my evaluation process is just mine. It's not like, it's not gospel. It's not something that works all the time. I've had success. I've had failure with it, but it's the same thing over and over. And when I look at someone like Aeneas Peebles, this dude's a football player, man. And he has winning traits and he has an ability to win in multiple ways. That's appealing to me. And I like that as an evaluator. I had more positive remarks than I had negative when it came to him. And I think that you're probably looking at a guy that you can get a value pick on. And so that's also appealing to me because you don't have to spend the highest draft capital on him.
And it goes to, I honestly, the theme of this episode is just get good football players. Don't overthink it, man. Don't overthink the measurements. Just
and if you see what Edgar put in the chat, thank you, Edgar, for just being Johnny on the spot here. He said that Amani Burris, Real Ball Watcher on Twitter, go follow him, look up, subscribe on YouTube. said that Peoples told him he did meet with the Panthers and that people said the meeting went great. So that is very interesting.
So there you go. Let's move on to the next one here. Joshua Farmer. Ricky, a guy I believe we both like. Tell us more about Farmer.
Hey, look, last year in the pre-draft process, I was on pins and needles trying to find out if Joshua Farmer was going to declare, because I was ready to just say, hey, look, I'm planting my flag right now. He's going to end up going in the 4th or 5th round, and he is going to be a stud. Now, I knew he was coming out. I still have been watching him all year. I've been studying him. He looked just as good, if not better. He is a ball of muscle and energy. I mean, seriously, dude. You remember they called Doug Martin, the running back, the muscle hamster? Well, this guy is like the muscle, like German shepherd. Like, he's big, right? Like, but he's just built out, man. I mean, he's filled out. This dude has terrific get off. He's got an array of moves. If you need him, here's the beautiful thing about him as far as the Carolina Panthers. He is scheme versatile, defensive front versatile. If you want to put him in a 2-gap system, which is what Carolina runs, and you need him to occupy two gaps, right? He could do it. He is talented enough. He's got the arm length for it. He's got the wingspan. He's got the strength. He can do that. You need him to pin his ears back and get after the quarterback. That's your guy. He could do it. This is a disruptive, athletic, strong, powerful young person. And I would take Joshua Farmer in a heartbeat. I think that he technically can play 0 tech. I think that he could line up directly over the center. You could maybe shade him over to 1. I think that he has a lot of versatility. I think he could even play all the way out to 5 tech, to be completely honest, because of his get off and burst. So I like Joshua Farmer a really good deal. And then all of a sudden I saw that Daniel Jeremiah, who is draft guru, right? I mean, this dude is like the end all be all in the draft conversation, had him in his top 50 players. And I was like, wow, that's the rocket emoji. Like he's gone now, right? So I think if you want Joshua Farmer, I think it's going to cost you a little bit more draft capital than it might have a year ago. But I think that whatever you spend on this guy right here, going to be money well spent.
Yeah, my notes, I wrote strong as hell. I mean, this guy is, I mean, you nailed it. He is a powerful dude and a disruptor on that D-line. And that's what Carolina needs, that shit, man. They need guys like that. He showed up in practice, in the game. He is fun to watch. And this frustrates the hell out of me. Carolina doesn't have a high 2nd round pick, because and they I would, at this point, I do think they're going to move up. They have enough picks in their arsenal to move up in that 2nd round. I don't know how far they're going to get. They might have to wager something away next year even. We'll see. I don't know. Just based off of history of trading up in the 2nd round that high up. I mean, look at the Rams last year. They had to give up a 2nd rounder to move pretty far up to Carolina at 39. So, but yeah, this is a guy I just don't think is going to be there. I don't think they take him at 8. I don't think he's going to be there. I think he's going to go in the back end of the 1st round. I really do.
Man, I'll tell you honestly, if I had to give my gut feel right now for him, Daniel Jeremiah is the highest I've seen on him. And I don't know if NFL teams are going to feel that strongly about him. I think he actually could be entirely in play at not only 57, but even potentially 73. I think that he could last.
Matt Miller had him going 26 to the Rams.
See, I don't know, man.
I don't know if you value about Matt Miller. I mean,
I like Matt,
but Matt's
plugged in. That's the thing, man. Even if we don't like some of these draft personalities or whatever, like I know a lot of people hate Mel Kiper, right? And I'll tell you though, these guys are so plugged in, and they've been doing this as their profession for so long. They speak to NFL teams. Like, this isn't just their opinion, right? A lot of the stuff that we talk about is our opinion and our take and our evaluation. These guys are connected, man. They have inside sources. So I had not seen that, Curtis, to be completely honest. I had not seen that Matt Miller had him going that high. You couple that with Daniel Jeremiah's ranking, man, maybe it is a little bit too late to get after a guy like Joshua Farmer. But I could still see him falling to that 57 pick, just because I think that there is again, we talk about that gaggle of prospects. I think that there is a big traffic jam of talent in that intermediate range that I think, hey, pick your poison. What do you need? What do you like? That maybe you end up having a guy like Joshua Farmer find his way down to you.
What's up, Doug? Said just stopping by to show you fellas some love. Appreciate it,
What up,
Doug.
Doug? Doug did great work at the Shrine Bowl, by the way. He was the one that talked to Louis Riddick, I believe it was. Was it Louis Riddick that he talked to? Yeah, I think so.
Was it?
Talked about the optimism in Carolina with Bryce Young, and then he had interviews with a couple of different prospects.
I saw
Doug,
the
if I'm wrong,
prospect one.
Doug, if I'm wrong about that, man, tell me if you're still in here. Bucky Brooks, that's right. My apologies. He talked about Bucky Brooks, and Bucky talked about how the optimism in Carolina based off of Bryce Young's season and all that. Doug did great work, man. So shout out to Doug being there, boots on the ground, and providing some content for Panthers fans.
All right, let's go to the next one here. Oh shit, we're jumping ahead. Walter Nolan. So this was Zach Griffin wanted our take on Walter Nolan. Ricky, fire away on this one. I didn't have much on him yet, but I know a lot of folks like him in that tandem with Prince. Is it Prince?
Princely, you want to yell in?
Princely, yep. Yeah. The tandem there. If they could potentially get them, I know people have talked about that online. I've seen that, but thoughts on Nolan at the D tackle spot?
When you mention that people talk about it online, guess what? I'm people. I want that. Give me that Jared versus Braden Fisk combination with the Ole Miss guys. I'd also take it in Oregon too. I've got a plethora of teammates duos that I would love here in Carolina. Walter Nolan specifically. The crazy thing about Walter Nolan, he is undersized. He's small, dude. Like that 293, that's light. But from every single person that I spoke to who was there in person at the Senior Bowl, they told me that 293 was pure muscle. And what that reminds me of, and what this guy reminds everybody of that I have spoke to, is Aaron Donald. The power that he packs within his hands. It is, people say there's a punch. This guy packs haymakers in both of these fists right here. Jack Johnson to Tom O'Leary right here, right? Ready to give you a pow right in the kisser. This dude's got haymakers. And not only does he hold up incredibly well against the run, and does he get in the backfield and is disruptive, can absolutely the pull, push, throw down, attack from the defensive interior. He is versatile. He can line up different places, but his interior pass rush, man, it is bonkers. This dude's get off, his acceleration is something to behold. And he's a nasty finisher. The arm length is pretty good too, to be honest, almost 34-inch arms for a guy who's 6'3" and a quarter. That's pretty solid, man, especially when you're talking about this dense, compact build, this frame that he has. I like Walter Nolan a whole lot. We talked earlier about Texas A&M, their defensive line, how it's like this conundrum about what happens when you have all this talent, right, with Nick Scorton and Shamar Stewart. Well, Walter Nolan was a transfer from Texas A&M, and he was very mediocre at Texas A&M from a production standpoint. He goes to Mississippi, and out of nowhere has skyrocketed up to being one of, if not the best, potential defensive tackle in this draft. And that's even considering Mason Graham. This guy is in the same conversation as Mason Graham, if you want my honest opinion.
That's big words there, Ricky.
It is.
We're gonna move on because I need to do more work on this guy. But I'm excited because I've heard a lot, not only from you, but also other great Panthers content creators about this guy. So I'm excited, and I know Carolina, I believe, has met with both of them. So there's definitely interest there, and we'll kind of see how this shakes out. But I do think these guys could be in play for Carolina. And I mean, again, it's just like, just get good football player. If you could get a tandem, I'm all for that too. Like I guys that know each other, that would work along the defensive line together. Like I think that would be awesome. Ricky, another guy yours, Jeffrey Bassa, and hopefully I'm saying that right. You can correct me. But hit me on this linebacker. So with the Carolina, they have decisions to make. They obviously have Shaq Thompson, who's coming off of another season-ending injury. They just drafted Trevin Wallace. I'm sure they're high on him still. He showed some flashes. He looked a little overwhelmed at times last year, being thrust in there. What do you like out of Bassa here?
So I thought that he just had a really nice week at the Senior Bowl. He wasn't super duper on my radar beforehand. I had watched a good amount of Oregon film based off of other prospects, really. Now, Bassa was also kind of like a safety linebacker hybrid. You see the size. Something, though, that stood out to me was some of the feedback about Bassa after the Senior Bowl, and it was his leadership. Now, look, I'm a huge fan of intangibles and being like an alpha in the room. I'm not a big fan of the whole term alpha, but in football, there is a real thing about having that dominant personality, being a natural leader of men. That's what Jeffrey Bassa has. Now, you brought up Trevin Wallace, Curtis, and this is why I was really intrigued with Jeffrey Bassa. First, let me say he registered the fastest GPS miles per hour of any linebacker, according to Zebra Sports at the Senior Bowl. So that catches your eye first, right? Speed. I love speed at the linebacker position as long as it comes with a little bit of thump behind it. I think that Bassa creates that. Now, his experience playing that hybrid of a safety linebacker also lends himself to being a fairly decent coverage guy. You bring up Trevin Wallace. Where I saw Trevin struggle the most, I think, last season was when he had the green dot on his helmet, when he was the point man. I don't think that's him. I don't know that that's where he was just this year or if that's him, period. I'm not sure. But Bassa is a leader. He is a communicator. And so if you're telling me that you could draft him in that day 3 range and have him groomed underneath Shaq Thompson, because Shaq Thompson, look, man, there's an expiration date on that carton of milk, right? I don't mean that in a negative way, but this dude has dealt with significant injuries. He's not that old. And I love Shaq, man. He's a Panthers legend. If I could give Shaq my ACL, I don't know if it's even intact anymore after our fun time together, hanging out and watching the final game of the year. My ACL might be gone. But if I still had it, I'd give it to Shaq, right? Because I want him to play forever. I love Shaq Thompson. But the truth of the matter is he's not going to play forever. So if you can bring in somebody that can learn behind him, who's maybe not, no offense, who's not Chandler Wooten or Claudin Sherless, then I think that that's probably a smart path to go. I like Josie Jewell a good bit. I don't want to piss Bryson off while he's already sick. He might just be sitting there just projectile vomiting hate at me right now because I'm not telling him how great Josie Jewell is. I like Josie. I don't anticipate Josie being the linebacker of the future for the Carolina Panthers. I would like to see that position shored up. Now, I have premier draft capital guys that I love at linebacker, but Bassa is a guy that I thought stood out at the Senior Bowl, should be talked about, and should be on the radar as a later pick.
Again, I'm not going to touch this because I didn't do too much on him, but I will say this. I do think Jewell and Trevin are the future at linebacker. I would be shocked if they go out and get a guy with the first 3 or 4 picks as a inside linebacker. I think Josie proved this year, and this is coming from a guy who didn't think he was going to be that great. I thought he proved he can command, he can be that communicator that you were talking about in the middle. We'll see if things go south with Evero, if he can still be that guy. But I feel like for this defense, he has proven that this past year. So I don't know. I honestly would be shocked if they go that route. I feel like me and you share the same sentiment that it's at this point probably time to move on from Shaq Thompson. We talked about that last episode. Does he come back for like a minimum? Probably, maybe. It sounds like he wants to retire a Panther, but like,
can I ask you? Can I ask you what is your confidence level on Trevin Wallace of being the answer? Not that they want him to be the answer, but that he showed enough that he is the answer.
I'm not very confident, but I think they see a lot in him. And that's where, I mean, I'm not the one calling the shots. They are. And I think they value him. I don't know what he is. He's a big question mark to me. I thought he was very overwhelmed last year. And I agree with you. When he was given the green dot, it was like the dude didn't know where he would, like, it was too much for him, way too much on his plate. But I felt like when a second year under his belt, given what he dealt with last year,
No
and
doubt.
Josie Jewell in the middle being the
Yep.
command center for that defense, I think you could see he can make some steps forward. But again,
For
it's a
sure.
big question mark for me too. Like, I don't know. Like, I mean, we were all high on
Right.
Cooper. I think that should have been the pick. I mean, that
Yep.
was your guy at 2.
And I
But
don't say this with the hopes that Trevin Wallace is not the guy. I want
yeah,
Trevin to work out.
we
I
all
love
do.
the athleticism. Right, exactly. We're Panthers fans, right? I love the athleticism. I love the physicality. I love the mentality that he brings. But that stuff has to translate into a player on the field. So my thought process with the linebacker in the first 4 rounds, what is that competition going to hurt? Especially when we have seen injuries riddle that position, and it became a huge weakness for the Panthers last year with injuries.
And that's fair. And I understand that. Like, I
Right.
agree that should kind of be the mindset. But I also think they value some of those back end guys too much, like the
No, that makes
Cheryl
sense. Yep.
and like,
Yep.
which I don't think we agree with. Obviously, like,
Right.
we've
Right.
seen
Right.
what those guys doing when they step in those positions, but that's kind of where, I don't know. I just see their mindset. But man, I
Yep.
mean, the way you talk this guy up, I think he's worth a fight. Like,
Yeah.
I remember there was a couple Senior Bowl plays. I'm like, damn, who's this guy out of Oregon?
That's
Like,
right.
he's making some plays. So,
Yep.
let's move to the next one. This was a guy you thought of. Before we get into him, overall, did you think the corners were lacking here at the Senior Bowl? I don't know how you felt, but I just didn't see a whole lot from this group,
I thought there
at
was
least in the
3.
game.
Yeah, the game maybe not so much. I thought there was 3 that stood out to me all week, and Jacob Parrish is one of them. I thought Maxwell Hairston out of Kentucky. I thought that he stood out. He looked like a really good ball player. And then I thought Upton Stout, who I think is going to be a nickel, possibly even a free safety. I think that he could play at the next level. He's a Western Kentucky guy, I believe. Those 3 stood out to me. But yeah, I'm with you. I didn't think that the cornerbacks were particularly impressive.
No one wowed me, I guess I should say. I don't know. But
And
what do you
again
got
on
on
those,
Parrish?
and again on the 1-on-1 drills too, those cornerbacks are back against the wall type of
Yeah,
deal. They're set up for failure there, you know. Okay, Jacob Parrish. Now I'm going to say something that is going to sound outlandish, and I don't want it to be misconstrued as me saying this is who this guy is. But there is a player comp that his play style and his size reminds me so much of that it has me giddy every time that I watch film of this guy, and I've been just barreling into it because he is a ton of fun to watch, man. Trent McDuffie, the Kansas City cornerback, who is one of maybe one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. Now, Trent McDuffie, I believe, is about 5'10" and a quarter or 3/4. So he's about an inch, a little less than an inch taller than Jacob Parrish. But weight, I think Trent is playing around 193. Jacob Parrish weighed in at 196. Jacob has longer arms and a longer wingspan and bigger hands than Trent McDuffie. I think that Jacob Parrish has phenomenal versatility, first of all. If you want to pigeonhole him as a nickel corner, he's entirely comfortable. He's got very fluid hips. His change of direction is pretty superb, that he can play in that slot and not be worried about being out in an island and not having that boundary as a safety net. But his work on the boundary, man, it's terrific too. He understands that field awareness. He understands the advantage of having that. He has some of the stickiest coverage you will see of any cornerback in this class. And I mean that sincerely. Go and watch his film. He is always on the receiver's hips. And if he does get beat on the line, because he plays a lot of press, this guy's a physical player. For being a hair under 5'10", this is a physical corner that is not afraid of press. But his recovery speed, if you get a step on him, he uses that length and he uses his hand timing so well. Timing, not time it. What the hell is time it? I've only had 1.5 beers. Hand timing so
One
well.
1.5. Catch up.
1.5. I know, man. I'm sorry. It's been a while. Look, I'm rusty. We've been off for like a month. Gets his paw in there, dude. He can elevate. He was a track athlete in high school. Terrific speed. I think that Trent McDuffie ran like a 4.4 at the combine. I anticipate Jacob Parrish to do just about the same, if not better. His ball skills are tremendous, instinctual. Edgar, when we did the show and I was talking, waxing poetically about Jacob Parrish, mentioned that when he watched his game film that I had the clips playing of, he said he looked fearless. That's a tremendous way to describe him, because he's not worried about getting beat. He trusts himself. He believes in himself to get back into position to make that play. He broke up a play in the end zone in the Senior Bowl. He made a really nice breakup on Jalen Royals, who was a draft crush for a lot of people at the Senior Bowl. On one of those one-on-one drills, Jalen Royals got a step on him, and exactly what I'm talking about. Jacob Parrish recovers, got his hand in there, knocked it away from him. This is a player that I truly believe has the possibility to be a huge difference maker at the next level. I will plant my flag right now and tell you that Jacob Parrish is one of the best corners in this draft.
All right, I'm going to take you down back to earth here a little bit.
Oh, come on.
Carolina's corners, not one of them is under 5'11".
Well, fire Zero Ever and hire me and draft Jacob Parrish.
Not saying he's not good. I'm just saying the likelihood of him coming. Carolina likes those tall corners.
Who did they draft in the 5th round last year, Curtis? Joe Smith-Wade.
Yeah, and I'm trying to – I don't know why.
Smaller guy. They played on the boundary. They wanted to move him to nickel.
I'm not saying showing up on the active roster. Yeah. That's what's throwing me off here. Okay.
That's crazy.
Does it say? Well, he was injured. That's what it was. Okay. Yeah, he's still 5'11", according to their website. But anyway, I saw them again.
No, you're right.
The big measurements, they're all about measurements. Like if the guy is in a measurement, they're not even looking at him. At least that's the way it seems. Let's go to the offensive side here. I know I'm sure there's other guys out there we can talk about defensively, but let's shift a little bit to the offensive side for the Senior Bowl. And we'll talk about this guy. I'm going to go first on this because I know this is one of your guys. This is one of your draft crushes, and I want to tread lightly with this because I know you really like him, and I don't mind this guy, which I feel very little reluctant on because this is Ricky who loved Jalen Polk, and I never saw it. I never saw it with Jalen Polk.
Don't forget, I also loved Xavier Worthy even more. I had him as my wide receiver 5 when everyone else had him back in the teens. So don't forget that part. Come on now. God damn it. Smite me on the internet.
Hey, I like Jordan Addison when not a lot of folks liked him either. And he
also liked Adonai Mitchell. And
hey, and that guy, I just don't think he got a good enough opportunity in Indy.
We could do a whole nother episode on Jalen Polk and Mitchell right now.
And I do think in the end, Mitchell will be. We got to talk about that bet offline, by the way.
I know.
But anyway, Jaden Higgins. So I saw Ricky. I know Ricky was always a big fan of this dude. So I'm like, all right, I got to see what this guy's about. I thought he had some really good practices this week. He had a really nice play in the Senior Bowl. He had that end zone catch, got the corner draped over him. Strong hands, makes the play in the end zone, which is really impressive. My question for you, Ricky, do you view him more as an outside guy or someone who's going to play in the slot? Because I know of the size you might say, well, 6'3", yeah, he might be able to play. Like, where do you see this guy fitting within an offense?
Yeah, he's a fully capable of playing the prototypical X alignment, in my opinion. And he has done that at both stops that he's played in college. He started off at a smaller school, moved over to Iowa State, both years immediately after transferring over, ultra productive. The question that people have with Jaden Higgins is his ability to separate and his vertical speed. That's the question. I'll tell you, he's not a burner. He's not going to run a 4.3. I don't think so. I think if he runs under 4.5, I think it's going to be wildly impressive and it's going to skyrocket him. He gets a lot of comps. He gets a lot of comps to Nico Collins because their measurables are fairly similar. People worry about his after catch ability. I will tell you, go watch the Oklahoma game and the Cincinnati game from 2023 and tell me what you think about his after catch ability. His short area quickness first of all, his route running is tremendous. He's got really good footwork for a guy his size. There's not a lot of wasted motion inside the routes. Now, his release package that we saw at the Senior Bowl, everyone was running. I forget who it was on the internet said it, but they were running TikTok routes. There was 10 steps on their release, 10, 12 steps on a release. That's not going to work in the NFL. It's not going to play. That's not translatable into the NFL, right? What Jaden Higgins does is that he's very efficient with his movement inside of the stem and at the break point, getting open and creating separation in that juncture. What I did see from him is that he was able to get behind the defense multiple times in drills. We saw the one where he created about, I don't know, probably 11 yards of separation off the line of scrimmage and beat a guy deep for a touchdown. But that touchdown that you're talking about in the actual Senior Bowl game was on that double pass from Ollie Gordon, the running back out of Oklahoma State. He got behind the defender there too. Look at that play. He was 4 yards behind, 4 or 5 yards behind.
It was a shit.
He just happened to have a running back throwing him the ball. So He had to come back and make an adjustment, fight through a face mask pass interference, essentially.
Got hit in the face and
still came up with it. It's a nice play. That's all over his tape, but his route running is also all over the tape. His creating separation is over the tape. Now, you mentioned the playing in the slot. He absolutely has slot ability. I think he could be a great power slot guy, right? This guy reminds me, and not play style, but when you talk about versatility, now he doesn't have the blocking prowess, I don't think, of this other guy, but you talk about moving him around and him being able to get open and just having great field awareness and then having really good hands. I mean, this guy had like a 2.7% drop percentage. Puka Nacua. I think that he has a very similar style in the way that he's a physical player. You don't ever look at him and say he's going to burn you. He's the fastest guy on the field. But if you put the ball in his hands, he's not boring, man. He will make a guy miss. He has really good short area quickness. He can stop. He can move to the other. He gets good lateral agility. I think that it's a little bit overblown. This past year, the Iowa State offense was not very vertical. They didn't get deep much. But before that, you look at his year last year in 2023, his longest catch was 60 or 75 yards. After that, it was like 68. The guy is a big play guy. And if you want to do the Nico Collins comp, he's ahead of him as far as route running. That's what Nico needed to fix. If he's ahead of that and he can make the athletic stuff catch up with the technique that he already has refined, watch out, man. This is a ball player.
So I wanted to just mention this because I just saw it come up on the feed while we're talking receivers. So Bryce Young had an opportunity to do some recruiting tonight, and he dropped the damn ball. So Bryce was at this Madden event. I don't know if you guys saw this, but he was asked the top 3 receivers he'd want to throw to. You would think maybe he'd mention some guys currently in the league. He didn't. He went retro, and he said Randy Moss, Jerry Rice, and Megatron. And the guy should have came out and said Garrett Wilson,
T. Higgins, Garrett Wilson, T. Higgins, DK
Higgins. And retro. I mean, he's not wrong. Like, those are the top end talent of wide receivers, but damn it, man, that was his opportunity.
So hold on, wait. Say the 3 that he said again.
He said Randy Moss in the order: Randy Moss, Jerry Rice, and Megatron.
Okay.
But
so he wants
follow those guys.
Follow that lineage, right? Yes. He wants either a precision route runner who has great hands like Jerry Rice, right? Maybe Garrett Wilson you could throw in there. I don't know. 6'4" burner, vertical threat. Randy Moss can jump out of the gym. Terrific contested catch. And then you look at Calvin Johnson. I can tell you one player in this draft class that people have lazily comped to Calvin Johnson, and that's Teteroa McMillan. I wouldn't put him that way. But 6'5", wiry, long frame. I don't know, man. Maybe what he's telling you is that he wants a big guy.
The dots here, folks. Give us a break.
Look at us. We're reading tea leaves and shit.
Oh shit! All right, let's go to this next guy. Another wideout, Jack Besh, and this was another guy I wasn't expecting, Ricky, and he just made plays in this game. Obviously, a heartbreaking story with his brother, but to catch the game-winning touchdown. But I thought he had really nice body control, contested catch he made, some toughness. They said during the broadcast, you refer to it as a 50-50 ball. He said, no, I refer to it as a 75-25 ball.
Yeah, I
which
love
I
that.
appreciate. Like, I like that confidence. He said it's my ball. But I thought, he just flashed throughout this game, and I get it. You might think, Carolina's got too many of these type of guys on their team, with Thielen and Coker, and but I just thought he made plays. It's someone that intrigued me. I'm not saying, Carolina should go out and get this guy in the first couple rounds, but he was just someone that popped off for me, and that I was intrigued by, and someone I do want to do a little bit more research on, from what I saw in the Senior Bowl. So just someone I thought I was worth mentioning. Um, what do you think of him in the during the week and in the game?
Phenomenal hand strength. He wasn't lying about the contested catch percentage, right? This guy has ultra confidence in it, and it's because of what he proves with his ability to catch the ball in tight windows and with somebody trying to interfere with it. I think that what you talk about with the story with his brother, it can't be understated how powerful that entire situation is for him, Jack Besh, and his family, that he had this opportunity to go down there, do that game-winning catch in that game. His brother Tiger was killed in the New Orleans terrorist attack. I mean, just remarkable stuff. I saw somebody talking today. I believe it was Damian Parsons. I don't want to say the wrong person if that's not who it was, but it was on Twitter right before our show, and there was an interaction with somebody, and they were saying how crazy it was that he was on LSU and outproduced Malik Neighbors as a tight end in his freshman year. This guy transferred over and outproduced him before Malik Neighbors' breakout. They were both on the roster, and this guy put up better numbers as a tight end. I believe that's what they had said. It shows you he has talent, man. He has ability. Is he the fastest guy? Is he going to test the best? I don't think so. Is he a football player? Can you rely on him to make plays? Can you rely on him to be where he's supposed to be? And can you rely on him in the locker room? Unequivocally, yes, for me. So congratulations, hats off to Jack Besh. What a way, man. What a way to spend that week.
Yeah, and I think he really raised his stock in this draft just on his performance, and I'll be curious to see how he does at the combine. There was one wide receiver, and I didn't make a graphic for this, but I do want to talk about him for a second, and that's Tez Johnson. We all saw the measurables, guys like 150 pounds soaking wet, like tiny dude, but he was making plays. His separation with guys and his speed it was popping off in those videos you saw online. What do you think of Tez? Do you think there's some value there, or do you think he's too small? Where do you see him, Ricky, within the draft landscape?
Man, I don't think he's too small to separate and catch a football. I think that he's proven he's plenty big to do that, right? The question lies when the pads are on and helmets are starting to crack. How does he hold up? I was a huge Tank Dell fan in the draft year that he came out in 2023. I wouldn't say that I'm low on Tank Dell anymore because of the injury that he had sustained and the injuries that he's sustained since. But it does give you reason to look back and say some of the conversation about frame and about size and about taking punishment at certain positions, some of it is valid. That doesn't mean that it should be a precursor to exclude somebody from a possible draft pick. I think that's silly. I think that what I would say with a guy like Tez Johnson, and what I even said about a guy like Tank Dell, you can't allocate a first-round resource to a guy like that because of the liability you're putting yourself in, right? Now, if Tez Johnson is sitting there at 73 and you have filled the first two picks with quality talent that you feel really good about, 100%, how does he not make sense for this Panthers team? This Panthers team, and I was having this, dude, I was talking about this today, Curtis, man, like whatever the Panthers do in this draft this year, there needs to be one objective, and that is to add juice to every single room they can in this draft and in free agency. This team is a slow burn of a football team. And you know what you can't do if you're a slow burn? You can't get behind. And you know what we have and what we have had? A terrible defense. So do you know where you end up a lot? Behind. We don't need to do that, man. Give us guys that can game change, break a game. And that is one thing. Say what you will about his size. Tez Johnson has game-breaking ability. There are other guys as well, LeJontay Wester, Luther Burden, Jalen Noel, another guy from the Senior Bowl who I loved, the other Iowa State wide receiver that is getting drawn comparisons to Steve Smith. That's going to make Panthers fans really nostalgic and warm and fuzzy when they see this guy.
Why do people do that, though? I'm sorry. People are like, oh, this guy's small and he can go up and catch the ball.
And
let's temper your expectations.
To be fair, Jalen Noel does have a very similar build. He was terrific as a punt returner and kick returner. So there's the versatility that might remind people of that. I'm not saying that that's the comp that I would give him, but I can see why the easy comp is something like Steve Smith, right? But the point is there are other people that could give juice. Regardless which way you want to do it, if you want to mitigate some of the risk and the reliability by not taking a 150-pound wide receiver, I would understand that. But what you have to do is you got to bring in that kind of skill set where you have to have some juice and you got to make this a dynamic offense because we cannot give Bryce Young another slow plotting receiver core for his foreseeable future.
Yeah, go look at the tweet I had of Darren Gann, and that wasn't by accident. When he had put in one of his mailbags that if defensive guys are gone, and this is at 8, but I think this really goes for any of their picks, and wide receiver is the best player available, and there's some speed there, you go out and get that guy. So 100%. I think and that guy's tapped in the organization, whether you want to believe it or not. I mean, he's in there in those rooms, or they're giving him stuff. I don't buy any of that shit. He knows shit. So yeah, that's just something to keep in mind, and I thought was telling as we get closer to the draft. And I lost my train of thought. I wanted to talk about quickly while we were talking about Steve Smith, and I wanted to talk about this off the top of the show. But the Hall of Fame, it's coming up tomorrow. Well, I think we'll find out tomorrow of who's going to be in. Based off of what Darren said today in his article, I don't think it's going to happen this year. Just reading the tea leaves a little bit. But do you think out of those two, who is the most deserving? And I know that's comparing two of the Panther greats, but if you had to pick between the two, I'm a fucked up person, Ricky. Come on.
Why are you mad at me, man? I'm the one who's here at the show. Why are you asking me this? God.
But if you had to pick between Steve Smith and Luke Kuechly, who are you taking for those they get 5 Hall of Famers this year? Who are you taking in that?
Well, we had this conversation a month ago, 2 months ago, something like that. And the argument came down to you had Steve Smith with the Triple Crown, which is a rare jewel. Good production every year that he got a majority of playing time as a receiver, right? But then you have Luke Kuechly, who literally the moment he stepped on the field, it was like he's the best defender in the league, right? Like it was almost just like the most evident, apparent thing in the world that Luke Kuechly was special. It happened immediately. For me personally, I would probably go Luke Kuechly. I just think that what I see with him is one of the best linebackers to ever play the game. And if he played for 3 more years, I think it would be a shoo-in. I think that you would be talking about him in, put him on the Mount Rushmore of defensive players in the NFL. But I can understand the longevity questions, and I'm also not taking anything away from Smitty at all for what he did and the ability to overcome circumstances and be a productive wide receiver one at his stature with the teams that he played on, and then going to the Ravens and continuing a little bit of production there. I absolutely adore both of them, man. As a Panthers fan, those were like key cogs in my life as a football fan. So I hope both of them get in. It sounds like they've made some rule changes. I didn't look into that, but there was some sort of tweak to the rules. It sounded like it was very unfavorable for either of them to get in this year.
So who were you siding with? I got lost.
I'm going to go Luke Kuechly. I got to go Luke Kuechly there, okay. I think.
Yeah, I'm with you. I just think, and I don't even know how to phrase this without, and I don't want to knock Steve Smith because I think he's deserving too.
You guys all heard that.
Um,
Curtis hates Steve Smith.
but I do think Luke Kuechly was at his position was a very, very, very special player. And I do think Steve Smith was a very special player in his own right. But I mean, Luke Kuechly, and I get the Patrick. Why am I
Patrick Willis.
blanking?
Patrick Willis.
Yes, thank you, Patrick Willis from San Fran. Um, I get that comparison. I just think his impact against opposing offenses was like bar none one of the top ever. So it would have to be Luke Kuechly for me. I do think they're both going to get in, but just reading the tea leaves, I don't think either of them are going to get in this year, which I think is
Right.
bullshit. I really do, because I do think Luke Kuechly deserves it. That guy was going to top Brian Urlacher. I mean, that he was on pace to top many of those records at that linebacker position. And I get it, his career he cut it short uh, on his own in his own willing. But man, I think he deserves to be a first ballot Hall of Famer without a doubt. So that would be my choice. If I had to compare the two, I know that's a sick question, but needed to be asked. But
I knew
like
you were gonna
Dom,
get into your I knew you were gonna get into your villain shit at some point in this episode.
while Dom is in here, I appreciate Dom. He says, smash like, subscribe. We got 400. I appreciate it. We have 450 people in here. We haven't been on in a month, and you guys tuned in tonight. So we do appreciate that. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We would greatly appreciate it. Let's get into this weekend. Obviously, the Super Bowl. We do have a bet for you. I don't know if Alex is still in here. He might be. I'm not sure. He might have went to bed. But we do have our Super Bowl, and mind you, the last time we did that, or we've been doing this despite not recording a podcast. And in the conference championship, we hit all three of us. And I,
Yes,
for
sir.
the first time all year, I bet our parlay. I'm bad. I shouldn't have lied. I should have lied and said we did. I've been doing it this whole
Should have been
time, but I
doing it
bet our
every time. What are
parlay.
you saying, man?
But I bet our parlay this last week. We hit. So here is our last one of the season, and here it is. So I'll let you go first, Ricky,
Okay.
and then we'll work our way up.
Yeah. If you remember that last one, the Commanders and the Lions played, and I had Jamison Williams on the over rushing and receiving. When you have a dynamic player that the team uses in both ways, right? That is one carry away from breaking that total. Give me that all day. Now with Xavier Worthy, what I'm really excited about too is they've been using him in the proper way of using him. They're using him everywhere. They're not trying to pigeonhole him. They're not trying to say this is the thing that you're supposed to do. Let's go do it. They're saying, hey, this is an opportunity. We want you to seize that opportunity. We want to draw this up for you. I think what you can always count on with Andy Reid and Matt Nagy in the Super Bowl, what you can count on with Pat Mahomes is a little razzle dazzle, right? Now, does that mean it's a double reverse? Does that mean it's a handoff to DeAndre Hopkins and DeAndre Hopkins chucks a touchdown to Xavier Worthy? Or does it just mean that Xavier Worthy breaks a little intermediate delay mesh route where he gets open and he takes off? Who knows? But he's 3 touches away from hitting that over. So give me Xavier Worthy on the over 62.5 total yards with a disciplined defense like the Philadelphia Eagles and that Vic Fangio system that plays everything downhill. You can erase good angles with what? Elite speed. That is what Xavier Worthy brings to the table. He has angle erasing speed. So a downhill defense with Xavier Worthy's speed, I think it's a recipe for a big one. I think he finds the end zone. I think that's another little bonus bet that I might do. But Xavier Worthy over 62.5 rushing and receiving.
Yeah, Bryson isn't here, so I don't know the statistic on that. I can maybe search it real quick, but he has DeAndre Hopkins at 11.5 yards of receiving, which I feel like that's a low ass number. I was shocked that he found this, to be totally honest with you. Let's see here.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
confirm
odds are
that.
decent, but they're not looking too
They're not
great.
110. What is his over receiving?
Well, he had 11 yards against Buffalo, and he had 0 in against
Yeah.
Houston.
Yeah.
um. So hey, bet our parlay, damn it.
Well, the thing is, though, Kansas City knows this is what DeAndre Hopkins came there
Yeah,
for.
I mean it's do
A
or
shot
die
at a
game.
ring.
You're gonna get to your
Right.
playmaker. Like
And so if you get an opportunity from the 15, right, and you have a one-on-one, you toss it up to DeAndre Hopkins, try to get him a touchdown, right? This is his shining moment. So maybe
yeah.
he's a little bit more involved than he was in those previous games.
So I just went with the hot hand here, and Saquon. The guy has been a touchdown machine in the playoffs. He had 3 last game. He had 2 the week before. A running back has scored a touchdown in of the last 5 years, or last 7 years has scored a touchdown in 6 of 7 in the Super Bowl. So odds are pretty good. The Eagles love to feed him in the playoffs. We've seen that. And the odds obviously are pretty in my favor because it happens so damn often. So I try to go with more of a surefire
I like it.
pick here, a little bit safer. But I do think there's a really good shot. And, Saquon, yeah, he's had a hell of a season, but I really think he is going to go off in this game. Like this is what he wanted to do. This was where he wanted to get to. Like he wasn't getting there with New York Giants. I think this is where you're really going to see why Philly went out and traded for him off of his fantastic season this year. So
Yep.
I'm all for it. I do think this is a pretty good one. So anyone, please, I know Alex will probably bet this, but we would appreciate it. Use our designated link. It's signupexpert.com/Panthers. They have all the sports books there. You click on it, join that sports book, and start betting. I'm sure most sports books are doing deals. They always do bonuses in the playoffs in the Super Bowl. You can get like 30% profit boosts. And so go check that out. This is the one we did through Bet365, but we would appreciate it. We haven't talked. I don't know when our next episode is going to be. I don't know if it's going to be next week or what we're going to do. So stand by. We'll probably post something on Twitter to let you guys know. But yeah, things are going to get interesting after the Super Bowl because we got free agency coming up. We have the combine, obviously. We have pro days. And then obviously the draft in April. So it's going to be an exciting time. I will be going to the draft. I think Bryson will probably be tagging along as well. I really wish Ricky could come.
Unfortunately, my son is born on April 25th, and I'm gonna have to be
Good
here
luck.
for the
So
birthday. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited because I'll tell you what, if you ever get the chance, you and I think it's a bucket list. You need to go to at least one, just
For
to
sure.
say you've went, because it's a cool experience. It's nothing like you get to experience. You are literally around 32 opposing fans, which is cool, and not
Crazy.
everyone's assholes, and you're not
Right.
just walking around calling each other out. You're talking, and it's
Right.
it's a cool atmosphere. It really is. So I definitely recommend if you have a chance to go to a draft, go to one. It's a fun experience, and there's a shit ton of stuff to do there. So, but yeah, we got a lot of stuff coming up. I know Ricky's got a lot of stuff too with his show that him and Edgar are doing. So we're going to provide you guys with the most content we can over these next couple months leading into the draft. And it's
You're gonna be
exciting
so sick of seeing this mug. You're gonna hate it.
because the off season for every team provides you a sliver of hope for the
Oh,
opposing
what do
year,
you mean
the
a
upcoming
sliver,
year.
man? It's the entire pie. This is what optimism is built off of right now. This is my time. I'm a romantic idiot. This is my time. I am thriving.
Yes, he is thriving. We're all thriving. But please subscribe to our channel. We will see you guys. Could be next week, could be a couple weeks from now. We will keep you posted online. But until then, keep pounding.